Gymnastics is just one of those sports where you have to be really strong. You have to be really powerful. You have to be very quick. The thing that was the hardest for me was probably flexibility. I wasn't the most flexible gymnast growing up, but that's something that you need. That was something I had to work a little extra hard for.
All right, you're listening to Hawk Talk. I'm here today with Jordyn Wieber. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Thanks for being on. So, got to start, I assume, day you're born, in the delivery room, do a round off, something like that, and just that's it. You're gymnast from birth, correct?
Pretty close to that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, let's start with where are you from?
Yes, I'm originally from mid-Michigan, kind of like in the Lansing area, a small town called DeWitt. Yeah, was born there. My family is still all there. I'm obviously not anymore, but yeah, grew up in a very athletic family. It's kind of a weird coincidence getting into gymnastics. No other gymnasts in my family, but a lot of athletes. We were a very athletic family for sure.
Were both your parents athletes? Like what kind of athletics were they into?
Yeah, so my mom ran track in college. So she was long jumper and the sprinter. And then, once she finished her college career, like started doing the whole marathon thing. So has always just been super into fitness and running and sports. And then my dad played football in high school and did that whole thing, but just both very athletic minded people, athletic figures. Genetics are definitely there for all of us to be athletic. I come from a family of 4 kids.
Very cool. And were your siblings also athletes?
They were, yes. So kind of all different sports. Like my brother was like the star quarterback of the high school football team. We were very close in age. So it was around the same time I was, doing the whole gymnastics thing. He was running the high school football show. My older sister did a lot of the same stuff my mom did. So running, soccer, track, marathons, things like that. And then my younger sister tried a few different things. Soccer was more so her thing. But I was only gymnast. So kind of held down the fort as far as gymnastics goes.
And when did that kick in? Like, I have a 2-year-old daughter now that her favorite thing to do is hang upside down. So I'm like, I look at her, I'm like, maybe that's where she's going with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, just like, I feel like every other kid, like my parents put me in gymnastics when I was younger, but the reason they put me in was a little bit different. They noticed I had these like little biceps and quad muscles like as a toddler. Yeah. Like I just had more of like a muscular build, really young. And so I think I was probably 2 or 3 years old. They put me in, your standard like mommy and me gymnastics class. And I did that for a while, took some time off of it, did like dance or something like that. And then by the time I was, I think 4 or 5, I went back to gymnastics and it was honestly just nonstop from there. It was the only sport I ever did after that time. And, gymnastics is one of those sports you really have to specialize if you want to, make it to a high level. So it was around that time I started to specialize.
And were you immediately like good at it? Like what drew you into it at 4 or 5? Or was it just your parents' push and you're like, all right, this is what we're doing because they said so?
Yeah, I was a few different things. I mean, my mom always described me when I was younger as a very intense child. I think even now in my adult years, most people around me would use the word intense to describe me. It's how I kind of approach life. I've always kind of, if there's something I'm going after, if there's something I want, like there's not a lot you can do to stop me. I'm going to figure out a way. So I've always had that kind of natural intensity about me, a natural competitiveness. I really like being good at things and setting goals and achieving them. That's just kind of like how I am as a person. Gymnastics really fed that in me from the get-go because I started out in the gym and I did a program called the TOPS program, which stands for Talent Opportunity Program. And essentially you do all of these like fitness tests and that's how you kind of get into the National Team Training Center. You get to go to a camp there. It's kind of this like honor. And I was just really strong as a young kid. So they're like, how many push-ups can you do? How many pull-ups can you do? How many press handstands? I was like, yeah, I'm going to be the best at all of these things. So the conditioning and the fitness part of it, like really fed that competitiveness, like goal setter attitude in me from a young age. The gymnastics skills, I think, came around a little slower than like the fitness and the conditioning did. Gymnastics is just one of those sports where you have to be really strong. You have to be really powerful. You have to be very quick. The thing that was the hardest for me was probably flexibility. I wasn't the most flexible gymnast growing up, but that's something that you need. That was something I had to work a little extra hard for.
And was that just a lot of stretching or how did you gain that?
A lot of stretching. Yeah. So it's kind of a combination of like working on static flexibility and also like dynamic flexibility. So probably some non-conventional techniques than my coaches did, but a lot of like doing the splits and being pushed down in the splits and putting your leg up on something and doing the splits, and just a lot of, like, honestly, just a lot of time. And, at one point I was waking up in the morning, like before I even started my day, was doing splits in my bedroom, just like dedicating everything I could to try to improve my flexibility, because I was always really strong, but that made my muscles more tense. So flexibility I had to work a little harder at.
Makes sense. And so obviously you started at a young age. When did you start competing? When did this start to become a thing of like, oh, I'm actually good at this versus I enjoy it?
Yeah, my first competition was when I was 7 years old. I started out at what was called level 5 and did that for a couple of years. I kind of worked through the levels, level 5, level 6, level 7, kind of skipped over level 7. I did like one meet, went straight to 8. And then in the course of 2 years, I did level 9, 10, and elite. So elite is kind of the path you go on when you're trying to make the national team and striving for the Olympics. So once I got to like age 10, I started rapidly excelling through those levels and learning new skills at a quick pace. But I remember my first competition vividly. And I remember we used to get ribbons, like you'd finish your routine and depending on what score you got a certain color ribbon. If you got a 9.0 or higher, you got a blue ribbon. And so I was like, yep, I'm getting all blue ribbons. Like that's what I'm going to do. No other color is acceptable for me. It just kind of took off from there.
Where did that competition come from? Like that competitive nature, so to speak? Like, why was it that you had to be as good as you were? Like, what drove that?
I really don't know. I think it's a combination of like, that's just kind of nature for me. Like that's how I was born. Whether it be genetically or just, something in me was competitive from the get-go when I was born. And then the other part, I think gymnastics, it sort of brings that quality out in somebody because there's always something new to learn. There's always the next step. You're never quite good enough, a lot of times in your coach's eyes. So it's like, there's always something more that you can be doing. And I was always a big goal setter. I think that's something that's just kind of ingrained in me from my parents. Like they're very hard workers. They are always, my mom has like 5 jobs at all times for no reason. And like, it's just, I grew up in a family that was very go-getter, very achievement-based. So I think it was kind of a combination of like, that's who I was. That's kind of how I was born, but also the environment I was in. And then gymnastics just really like accentuated it.
Got it. And so you were 10 years old and on your way to the Olympics. Is that actually, would I hear that right? So that like at 10, you're already talking about maybe the Olympic future happening?
Yeah. So I had just turned 11 when I first made the U.S. national team as a junior.
Oh, okay.
Which is pretty young. Most girls, I would say, kind of get to that point by like 14. So I was a little bit on the younger side. And that meant like I was going to national team camp once a month for 5 days in Houston. I was being sent out on international assignments, meaning I was going and competing across the world for Team USA.
Were you in 6th grade at 11? Is that right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
I mean, it just seems like that's a lot to be thrown into as an 11-year-old.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, like throughout the whole thing, like all the way through school, I did stay in public school because my parents and I were very passionate. Like this is the only like normal thing that I do is I go to school. And so I got very lucky to have a school that would just work with my schedule. But I missed a lot of school, traveling and going to these camps. Yeah.
And how was that? Like did you go with your parents or were you by yourself at 11 getting sent to Houston?
So each time I would go, it would just be me and my coach. And so we would travel together and we would get there and I would room with other girls around the national team, no parents. And there was, hardly any self-service there. So I could barely call my parents. But yeah, it was like a very adult thing to do at a very young age, I will say. Yeah.
I feel like I was like 14 before I started being able to travel alone. So 11 is a jump.
Yeah, for sure.
And so how was that? How was that like getting thrown in? And it sounds like most people around you are like 13, 14, 15 kind of age range.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so getting thrown into that, like, what was that like? Was it intimidating? Was it just kind of like, was it exciting? What was it like?
Yeah, I think a little bit of everything. It was, the environment that I was going to in these monthly national team camps was a very intense environment. It wasn't a lot of fun and games. You're going and the expectations were incredibly high. The pressure was incredibly high. You're just sort of being like evaluated constantly, no matter how tired or sore you were. It was just like, you need to be on and you need to be performing at a high level. So they were intense, that's for sure. They were very, very exhausting. But the best part about it was doing it with the other girls that were kind of in the same going on the same path as me, and, being able to make those close relationships with them, even though they were from all over the country. Like some of us were from, California, Boston. I was from Michigan, Florida, like wherever. We just kind of all came together for this common purpose and built a really strong team. I mean, Team USA has always been really dominant. And I think those camps were a big part of that because it just brought us together and we all pushed each other.
Being 11, we're like, obviously physical development, et cetera. Like, were you able to compete at that age? Because as you said, you were stronger than most for your age, but when you're, going up against people that are 14, 15, how was that experience? In a lot of athletics, that's just unheard of. So I'm curious on the gymnastics.
Yeah, so the elite level in gymnastics is kind of split between two kind of age groups. There's junior and senior. And so in order to be senior, you have to be 15. So I was kind of at that junior level for, however many years, 11, 12, 13, 14, for some kind of like 4 or 5 years. And so I ended up being junior national champion a couple times and, kind of did my thing at the junior level. But it was sort of like everyone was waiting until I was going to be a senior because I just been junior for so long that I started so early. But then really entered that senior scene when I was 15. And that's when we were talking about things like going to the World Championships and getting close to the Olympic Games because London was really approaching. So that junior career, I think, was really good for me because I was able to go compete internationally and kind of gain my confidence as a gymnast before I entered that senior stage.
And was it kind of always a straight path of like, was there any doubt throughout this path that like, maybe I won't be the one to go to the Olympics or maybe I'm not going to make it to the senior stage, et cetera? Were you always pretty consistently at least winning enough and being successful enough that you were able to stick with it?
I would say the biggest thing that I experienced that kind of took me off that path of excelling was injuries. When I was 14, I actually tore my hamstring like off the bone, and which, if you know anyone that's done that or if you've done that, like it's a really long recovery. And if you come back too quickly, you re-injure it very easily. So from like 14, like basically my last year of junior until I was turning senior, I was injured and not able to compete for over a year. So that was really tough because it's funny now because at that time I was out of competition and the junior that was like really hot and coming on the scene at that time was Kyla Ross. And Kyla Ross and I ended up being Olympic teammates, and now we actually coach here at Arkansas together. So it's just funny to even say that. But yeah, she was like the hot junior on the scene, and she came in and became junior national champion right after me when I was hurt. And so my coach used to always say like, "Oh, Kyla, like she's really good. She's coming for you. Like she's probably working harder than you." And he would say all these things to try to get me motivated and get me back faster. But yeah, the injury thing was probably the hardest. I mean, there were various other ones, but that was probably the most long-term injury that I dealt with.
And when you had those, were there ever points where it's like, this is it, I'm not doing this anymore? Or were you always like, no, that's like, but yeah, I feel like everybody goes through that. So it's not a judgment, but it's more, I'm curious, like how you dealt with any sort of doubt that came up. Yeah.
I mean, I can remember very vividly having days where I was just having a really hard time at practice and things were not going well, that I would decide in that practice, like I'm done, like I'm quitting, but like always the next day I kind of turned it around. And, I think that was a great life lesson for me. Like as a kid going through that, like as bad as it might seem, you wake up the next day, like it's probably going to get better, even when you think it might not. But beyond those tough days, I never really had a time period where I was like, you know what, this isn't for me, because I had that dream and that goal of going to the Olympics. It was so powerful and it had so much power over me that like it kept me going through all of those, injuries and hard times. And, it's such a short time span in a gymnast life where you have that window of being able to make it there. I think if I had had any large time period where I was wanting to quit, I don't know if I would have made it in the end.
Makes sense. And so come back from injury, go into the seniors. Did you start winning right away, or what was the path at that point?
Yeah, I mean, it was after that, I'm trying to remember, it was, I competed internationally as a senior for the first time. And then when I was 15 or 16, around that time, so the year before the Olympics, I ended up making the World Championship team in Tokyo, which is a big deal. Like a lot of people look at World Championships and say, well, it's actually a bigger deal than the Olympics because there are more countries that are involved. It's a bigger field of play. So I made the World Championship team, which was awesome. And then I don't even know how it happened, but we went there and we won gold as a team. And I won gold in the all around, which I never ever would have expected. And that was the thing that sort of like changed my life forever, because when you're world champion the year before the Olympics, all the eyes are on you. It's like, you're the one to watch. The pressure's on now. You better make that Olympic team and you better go strive for gold in the Olympics. It was pretty life-changing, being 16 years old and being world champion.
And you say you were surprised by it. Like, obviously, it takes a level, and from what I've seen in terms of being a high performer in general, but in athletics especially, to have a level of confidence, sometimes almost cockiness that, like, no, I am the best, or I can be the best, to give it your all. When you say you didn't expect it, was it just like you were giving it your best, but you knew there were other good people, and then you were like kind of surprised, or was it truly like you had no thought that you were going to be the best that was out there?
I don't know. I would say, like, I always had a very high level of confidence and I knew I could achieve greatness. I think, going into world championships, like, my number one focus was be the best, like, member of the team that you can possibly be. And that's always our goal anytime we go and compete around the world for Team USA. The number one focus is the team. So we went and we won gold as a team. And then, my focus wasn't really on the individual competition. So I had qualified to finals, like, knew I was going to go give it my best shot, and then actually made a pretty big mistake on bars during the competition. And there was a really, really good Russian gymnast at the time. Her name was Victoria Kamova, who, was going to be hard to beat even if I had my best day. But I ended up having that big mistake on bars and still finished on beam and floor really strong and ended up winning by like 0.033 or something ridiculous like that. So I think that's why I say it was a surprise, because it just came down to the wire. Even with the mistake, I was able to pull out that win.
Got it. That's amazing. And so, as you said, a lot of the pressure's on going to the Olympics. You've been thinking about this since, actually, we'll rewind a second. When did you first think about the Olympics? When did that kick in? Was it when you were 4 and starting there, or was it, like, at what point did that start becoming a dream?
It became a dream for me first when I watched the Olympics for the first time. I was 9 years old. It was the 2004 Olympics. So names like Carly Patterson and those girls, Courtney Coupettes, like all of those amazing athletes on that team. I remember watching them. I remember exactly where I was, and was really obsessed with gymnastics at the time because I was, doing my own thing in the sport. And I was like, okay, yep, this Olympics, that's what I want to do. That's my goal. And I'm not going to stop till I get there.
Perfect. And so you get there, you make the team. Was it, I guess, what is the balance between nerves, excitement, anxiety? Like, how was it going into that first Olympics, the thing you've been thinking about for 8 years?
It was crazy. I think, the process of even making the team was like way more intense than like the actual Olympic experience itself, because, just that realization that out of all of the amazing gymnasts in the country, only 5 made the team. So that, your chances are just really, really tough. So I think making the team was like the bigger part. And then actually getting there, I mean, it was all the things. It was really surreal. It was hard. It was intense. It was a dream. At the same time, I was dealing with another injury simultaneously. I had a stress fracture in my shin. And so, that made it a lot harder to feel like I was 100% just with the pain of that and training through it. At that time, I was like, you know what? It's the Olympics. I'm not going to stop because of a stress fracture. I'm going to push through. And I was able to, thank goodness. But it was just all things. There's a lot of emotions. It was crazy, but all around, it was really a dream come true. And I'm so grateful I had that experience.
Well, in a lot of sports, aren't you automatically qualified for the team if you win a world championship, or you're like a lot of different sports? Obviously, everybody builds the team differently, but usually if you are literally the world champion, you're probably going to the Olympics without too much of a battle. In this case, it sounds like you had to go through a bunch of things, and it really meant nothing other than pressure.
Yeah. I mean, it's really not that way in gymnastics. It's like, on the day that they're choosing the team, the best 5 were going to make that team. So it really didn't matter what you'd achieved before. I mean, there were even Olympians that made the '08 team that came back, and like Alicia Sacramone, Shawn Johnson, Nastia Liukin, like they all came back to try to make this second Olympics and couldn't make the team. It's just, you have to be really peaking at the right time. And luckily, I was, and I think in Olympic trials, I came in second. So that first spot at Olympic trials, like if you come in first at that meet, you're automatically on the team, but everybody else is individually chosen. It's not always an all around rank order. And so, we finish Olympic trials, they go back in this room and we're all sitting there like waiting for them to come in and announce the the people that are on the team, oh my gosh, that was one of the most intense moments of my whole life. It was just so excruciating having to wait. But just really grateful that they did call my name in the end.
And so you end up going, and what is the age range usually for women's gymnastics? I know it starts young, as you said, 17, but like, what is that usually age range for women on the gymnastics team?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed a lot over the years. You have to be at least 16 years old to make the Olympic team, or at least turning 16 that year. So that's the minimum age. And I would say like back in our day, like in my Olympic days, like, you expect people to be between like 16 and 20 was maybe the oldest, but all of that is changing now. I mean, you've got people like Simone Biles and Jordan Childs and Jake Carey who are, going to their second, third Olympic games, and they're well into their 20s, sometimes mid 20s. So, I think the perception of what is possible in our sport is changing all the time. Whereas before it was like everybody thought, hey, you peak before this age, and it's, you're usually going to be at your best before you hit puberty, and all these like misconceptions, I'll call them, about gymnastics. I actually love that it's changing, and now people are proving all those things wrong.
What do you think is driving that?
I think there's a few factors. There are some healthier coaching techniques and healthier environments for athletes to train in now, to where you're not pushed to the point where you burn out as quickly. I think some of the athletes are able to continue are able to go on because they still love it. They still have those goals. They're still, that fire inside of them. I couldn't have said the same when I retired from gymnastics. I was pretty much done emotionally and physically. I think a big part of it as well is now that NIL is a thing in college athletics. Back in my years, like I had to choose, do I want to be a professional athlete, or do I want to go and get a college scholarship and compete in the NCAA? Now they don't have to make that choice. So they're able to maintain their careers throughout their college years. Whereas before, you literally had to put your whole elite career on pause for 4 years because it's just not that worth it to not be able to capitalize off your name, image, and likeness.
The top, that gymnast, it's probably the most paid NIL, Livy Dunn. Is she the number one biggest benefactor of NIL from what I've heard, I think, or like has made more money than
sport, yeah.
Yeah. So that's cool to see that gymnastics has won that battle in that sense. And so go to the Olympics. How'd it go? Let's talk about the experience there. Once you're in, like you got through the pressure of being chosen and going through the training. How was the experience at your first Olympics?
It was overall amazing, but it had some very high highs and some low lows. It wasn't all, just a dream for me. I would say like, from a team standpoint, again, like my mindset was always team is number one, and that's what I'm here to do. And we ended up being able to go and win gold as a team, which was, oh my gosh, I couldn't have asked for anything better than that. And I couldn't have asked for better teammates. So that was amazing. On the flip side, on the individual side of things, I know I talked about just the pressure going into the Olympics, being the reigning world champ, to kind of vie for that all around title. So on qualifications day, I ended up coming in fourth place all around in the top 24, qualify on to all around finals. But they have this rule in gymnastics, it's called the 2 per country rule. And when you go through the rankings, only the top 2 from every country get to qualify on. So if you're the third American, even if you're in fourth place in the all around, you get bumped out of the finals. And so unfortunately that was the spot I was in, and, looked up at the scoreboard at the end of the meet and saw my name in fourth. And I was like, okay, like, not my best day, but like awesome. And then my eyes kind of shifted up to third and second and first, and saw, my other 2 American teammates up there.
Yep.
And just felt crushed by that, because I was really happy for my teammates, but, just was really mad about the rules. You think about the Olympic Games, you think about an Olympic final, and you want to see the best of the best competing. And so to get bumped out of fourth place of, not qualifying the finals was really, really heartbreaking for me. But that wasn't my story for the Olympics. But it was a couple days later, we went out and won team gold. So that made it even better.
So you still got to walk away with a gold and fulfill that dream, even if it wasn't in the all around.
Yeah, absolutely.
And did you have thoughts of going back and saying, going for 2016 and wanting to jump back into the Olympics? Or was it like, did you always think like, this will probably be the one Olympics I go to and then move on to something else?
Yeah, well, initially I did. I think I got back from London and, we did a whole post-Olympic tour and all these different appearances, and got back in the gym after that. And initially I felt like I had unfinished business in the sport. I thought, okay, I want to keep going. I want to make it back to the Olympic Games and vie for that all around medal. And, went back to training for probably another year and a half to 2 years. And I started realizing like I didn't have that same like fire inside of me. Something about training only for that like individual all around goal like did not like inspire me as much as being a part of Team USA and being a part of that
Yeah.
team. Like I just sort of realized about myself that I'm such a team oriented person. That's what really I love to do. I love being on teams and achieving more with other people than you can on your own. So I ended up going to college at UCLA and got involved with the program there. Started out as a team manager, ended up, getting into my coaching career and quickly realized like, this is the kind of environment that I want to be in. I want to be a part of a team. I want to help these people achieve something great. Ultimately led me to coaching, which I'm so grateful for, but just didn't have that same, fire that I had before and just knew it was time to turn that chapter.
Yeah, makes sense. And yeah, by the way, we're down the street from UCLA on the edge of Santa Monica. So we're right there.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So did you do 4 years at UCLA like to study while you were coaching, or was it more for the job side?
So I went to school at UCLA. I was a team manager for my first 3 years with the program. And then my senior year, got the opportunity to start coaching a part of that program. I ended up coaching there for 3 seasons under the legendary head coach there at the time, Miss Val. She was nearing her retirement and just kind of took me under her wing and mentored me and taught me everything. I told her, hey, I want to be a head coach someday. So she showed me the ropes and gave me a lot of responsibility that not a lot of other young coaches do when they first start out their career. Ultimately led me to be able to take on a head coaching position. So I'm really grateful.
Amazing. And so now you're head coach at Arkansas?
Yes.
And how has that been? How is stepping into that? How is it working with, up and comers and, frankly, people not that much younger than you, but that probably look up to you and want to aspire to what you've done? How has that been?
Yeah, it's been amazing. I love what I get to do because it's, I would say, probably 40% coaching and the rest of it is, obviously the things that every coach needs to do, the stuff in the office, the marketing and the promotion of the program, the relationship building with people in the community and donors. And, the part that I love the most, I think is the biggest part of my job is like the one-on-one connections and relationships I get to make with my student athletes and guide them through like 4 of the most transformative years in anyone's life. I mean, everybody who's been to college knows like you learn so much about yourself and you grow up so much being apart from your parents for the first time. It's crazy. So being able to be that support system for them and really show them and teach them life lessons through the sport of gymnastics, that's what I'm really passionate about. And, I get to be a leader of a team and figure out how to improve our culture every single day. It really inspires me. So I wake up every day just excited to come to work.
Love that. And so a couple more questions for you. Number one, what's next? Where do you see the future for you?
Yeah, I mean, for right now, we're trying to win a national championship here at Arkansas and continue to get this program, to the number 1 spot. Last year, we made it to the national championship, which, that's obviously a big step for the program. We finished number 7 in the country. So this year, we're striving for more. We're striving for that next step. Just really enjoy impacting young people's lives, whether that be through my coaching or, doing speaking engagements and telling my story. And so, yeah, I'm just going to continue doing that. I'm going to be a mom this year. So I'm excited about that. Thank you. So that's going to be a whole new chapter of life.
And dad with, the second one on the way. And it's the best thing ever. And I don't think enough people emphasize how amazing it is. It is really hard the first few months, especially for the mom. But it just after that, it just gets better and better and better and better.
That's what pretty much everybody says. So I'm looking forward to that. And that's pretty much the next chapter for me.
Love it. Well, last question. For someone trying to pursue their dreams, achieve great things, what would be one piece of advice you either did get or wish you got that you would share with someone else trying to pursue what they dream of?
Yeah, I've done so many reflections on my gymnastics career and since I've retired and have learned a lot about just some things about my mindset that I wish I could go back and tell myself. Gymnastics really brought out the achiever in me and the goal setter in me. But a lot of times I think in the sport of gymnastics, I was taught that if I didn't make the goal, if I didn't win, if I wasn't the best, then it just wasn't good enough. And that was equivalent to failure. And, reflecting on my career now, I think if I could go back and tell myself, like, just because you don't win and you don't achieve your goal doesn't mean it's failure. Everything you do is an opportunity to learn and grow and get better. And sometimes we have to lose and not be the best to really figure things out in life. Since finishing gymnastics, I've really kind of redefined success for myself. Success is not always equal winning. And I wish I could go back and tell myself that when I was a young gymnast. I think it helped me in a lot of ways to have that mindset. But at the same time, I think it caused me a lot of hurt and disappointment when I didn't win, even though I was still amazing and I was still a great gymnast. So I would go back and kind of tell myself, hey, like, figure out how to redefine what success is. And as long as you can go to bed at night and say, hey, I did everything I could today to be the best that I'm capable of becoming. And that feeling, that peace of mind that you can get from that, that's really what success is. And that's kind of the motto I live by now.
I honestly love that advice. And also love, like, I asked that question on this podcast now 150 times and the answer is always different. And that was very poignant. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, Jordyn, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on Hawk Talk.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.